I think from there is probably when I was introduced to Final Fantasy VII for the first time. And yeah, that was Final Fantasy as a franchise has changed my life in so many ways. But yeah, I think like Final Fantasy VII was another light bulb moment of not only can games, tell stories in different ways, but they can tell really rich, detailed, amazing stories that like, where there's so many pull the rug out from under you moments. And there's really like, there's a party of characters that you get to know and care about and love over, hours and hours and hours of game time. So you get a chance to get to know them better than you would, even in an animated series that's hundreds of episodes long. Final Fantasy VII, I don't know, it was just, there was something about that story that really stuck with me and has still stuck with me over the years, because I mean, Tifa Lockhart's just one of my favorite characters ever. But
it's kind of part of your branding, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it really is, but
like Aoife Lockhart, what?
There was just something about her, I don't know, I think it was like, because she wasn't your standard, sort of white mage character that you so often found in games, especially at that time. The fact that she was like, I guess like she was a monk, right? Like she was a martial artist, but she just sort of fell outside a lot of the tropes that female characters, or the boxes that female characters fell into at that time. But she was also really kind and soft and sweet. And I just loved that about her, that she could encompass all of these different things and not be so easily, I guess, like she was just cool.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with everything on that. Like, I think, having that complexity of character, and I think that's what like Square did so well with those games, is just creating these all-round characters that do have backstories, that do have depth.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be the traditional trope that you always, because I think like maybe even with sort of more hardcore like JRPGs, I sometimes just get tired of like this sort of traditional, this character must project this thing and must be held to this kind of pedestal.
Yeah.
Whereas Square Enix were just like, Square were just kind of like, yeah, no.
And I mean, even when they do that, it's still done often in an interesting way. Like Yuna in Final Fantasy X, for example, she literally is like the definition of a white mage. But she has like all of these really gentle and sweet properties, but there's hidden depth there, and there's a reason story-wise for that as well. I mean, 10 I just loved. I think it was like that like really weird, awkward teen romance thing that was hitting at just the right time in my life as well, where I was like, this was like such a love story between her and Titus. Although I didn't say that back then. I don't know about you, but back then it was not Titus.
I say Titus. Yeah. I can't get it. Like, it just, I can't get behind it. But no, like with Final Fantasy X, I think probably we're about the same age when that happened. Like, it was like the colors and the atmosphere and like the world of Spira, I just love.
From that opening, like cutscene where Auron's on the thing and Titus is in the ball and that music kicks in. I was gripped. I mean, this was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And it just got cooler from there, because like you have Auron, you have Kimahri, Blitzball is so much fun. It took me a while to get into it, but once you get it, you get it. And it's like, that's probably one of my favorite Final Fantasy mini games, I guess. I got real competitive about that. I got real angry at those opposing teams.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Especially like before you could get like the really good characters. Like Nimrok was always the one that I had to. I'm just like, Albed, just get rid of him. Just get rid of him so I can have him.
I know.
And then I can win. But what a cool concept to have to like trade team members.
Yes.
And they're in the world as well.
And this is coming from someone who I have zero interest in sport. Like zero. But when it's a fantasy sport where like there's interesting like things and poison shots happening and stuff, I'm like, okay, you've sold it on me a little bit more. But I think Final Fantasy X for me is like, it's probably my favorite after 7, just because I love the story. For some reason I really love it when the summons, the aons in that case, take center stage in the narrative, because that's not always the case in every Final Fantasy game. But I mean, it was just a really cool idea that you go around collecting them. And one of the other like moments in that game that are just seared into my brain, and I think are probably like a foundational block of my personality, is, you know, when they're all like coming in for the wedding, and like, and Yuna's like, you know, you think she's going to do this sort of like really sort of martyr-y thing, and she falls off backwards, and then summons Valifor, and Valifor comes down and just, oh my gosh, like,
what a cutscene. Such a good cutscene.
And still stands up to this day.
Yeah, 100%.
Incredible, you know?
100%. Yeah, like everything about that was just so fun. But I have to ask, like, so for me, when I first played Final Fantasy X, I played it quite oddly because I also was sharing with my brother, but I didn't live with my brother.
Okay.
So like whenever I would go to my mom's house, I'd be able to play these games.
Yes.
With Final Fantasy VII, I guess, did you always like start from the beginning? Did you like kind of carry on the same save when you first started, or did you kind of like play through his saves?
So the very first time I played it, yeah, I was like kind of almost had to hide the save a little bit. And there was
put it all the way down at the bottom.
Yeah. It was that, and it was like, okay, and it
so
was
cute.
but that was tense as well. Where you're like, at any point it could get deleted, and the further you get, the more invested you are.
Yeah.
So yeah, the first couple of times I played it were sort of real risk versus reward sort of thing. Eventually, I mean, I aged up and I did get my own sort of copy of the game, and generally my own, but like, you know, console, I suppose. But and then I got the official strategy guide, and then it was like, you know, and then it was like, oh my gosh, there's a whole other layers to this game that I didn't even understand.
Like the
beforehand.
weapons and stuff.
Oh, the weapons.
Yeah.
Oh, the weapons. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, but that's like, it just shows longevity and of, you know, the replayability of these games. Even now, I think the most recent time I replayed that was maybe 2 years ago. And it gets faster and faster every time, of course, now, because you're like, you can now fast forward through all the random encounters and stuff.
I love that functionality so much.
I remember when it was first announced, I was indignant. I was like, you can't,
love it.
But then try playing through it without it now. It doesn't work at all.
No. Oh, I had the same exact thing with handheld. I was just like, I'm never going to not play on what am I doing all the time now? I'm playing on my Steam Deck all the time.
Because we've seen it before. To be fair, the first time you play it, maybe not, you know, and the first time you encounter something, you should see it through. It's like skipping through the summons, you know, the animation. The first time, no, that's you know, sacrilegious, but after that, then it's fine.
Final Fantasy VII actually inspired you to start writing about games as well, didn't it?
Yeah.
So like, when did you kind of get first exposed to games media?
I mean, it's funny that we're talking about this here, but yeah, I guess games media, it wasn't until I was in uni, to be honest, and it wasn't until I was kind of like finishing up at uni and I saw GINX TV advertising for writers and stuff, and this was lifetimes ago, so it was a very different company then, but I remember seeing it and thinking, because I was just applying for random jobs out of uni, because, you know, you need to, and I remember seeing like, oh my gosh, you can write about games. Like, this was like winning the unicorn lottery. It wasn't something that had ever occurred to me that it was possible to do as a job. And I remember like turning up to the interview, and like, this is a completely different building, completely different set of people, but like, it was just a bunch of nerdy guys in like Acton or something, or wherever it was in London at the time. And I think there was just a bit of like, is this a mix-up? Who are you? Like, what are you doing here? Like, you know, and I was like, please, can I write about games? Please. I would love to write about the games. So yeah, that was genuinely my first introduction. And it was one of those things where, like, you know, you start writing about games, and then that was sort of freelance. So I had to do other stuff at the time. At this point, I thought I was going to go into like film and TV. That's what I did at university, and that's kind of like where I was headed. But this was like literally the perfect job where you write about games for TV. This was like, I was like, got this. This is done. And then it was from writing about games freelance, there was a full-time position came up. And from there, it was like producing and writing. And then it was like, maybe you want to talk about it on camera, which was a terrifying concept in my mind at the time. But that was kind of my introduction to the world of games media, where I met, you know, people who I am friends with to this day, and the world that I inhabit to this day, which is like weird to think about it. But yeah, it's been over a decade now, which is wild.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.